Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kimberly Ayala, retired from the Division of Undergraduate Education, and I was the director for the Undergraduate Undeclared Advising Office. And on behalf of the organizing committee, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to another What Matters to Me and Why here at UCI. First, some housekeeping announcements. This talk is being filmed. By entering the room, you have consented to being filmed. If you would not like to appear on the video, please move to the back of the room. Also, please wait for the microphone during the question and answer session. As staff, faculty, and students, we spend much of our time engaged in exams, homework, lectures, budgets, personnel, and other topics, doing the things that are required to keep the university and our careers running. What matters to me and why is a chance to take a few minutes each month to stop and take a bit of a break. Every month, we have the opportunity to hear from someone who shapes UC Irvine through their daily activities. They give a short informational talk followed by ample time for questions and discussion. There is no prescribed topic. The speakers are simply asked to answer the question, what matters to you and why? Authentically and frankly, and take it wherever it goes. The series provides a forum for speakers to talk about their values, beliefs, motivations, and perhaps to share how these have been shaped by their personal experiences, including both the highs and lows encountered along the way. The hope is to strengthen bonds between the faculty, students, and staff who teach, learn, and work here, and celebrate both the diversity of our community and the commonalities that bind us together. One thing that is really nice about What Matters to Me and Why is that it brings together people from across the campus, as well as undergrads, grad students, staff, and faculty. So it's our tradition to give people a chance to introduce themselves to each other. For our in-person audience, we will take a couple of minutes for you to turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself. If you are on Zoom, use the chat to say hello, share your name, if you're a student, faculty, or staff, and what your department is. This will just take a minute or two. So let's get started with that now. So you can introduce yourself, or maybe behind you. Okay, time to start the presentation. I would like to introduce to you Pedro Fuentes, a member of our What Matters to Me and Why committee.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is Pedro Enrique Puentes. I am a history grad student here at UCI. And it is an honor and pleasure, es un honor y un placer, to introduce Adelí. So just a quick little bio. Adelí Durón is the inaugural director of the Latinx Resource Center, which opened in the fall of 2019. She currently serves on the UCI OC Alliance for a Latino Thriving University. She is the co-chair of the Latino Excellence and Achievement Dinner. Previously served as the co-chair for the Chicano Latino Staff Association. In addition, she is the commissioner on the Orange County Human Relations Commission, is currently a registered Girl Scout volunteer and a volunteer for El Sol Academy in Santa Ana. She served on the 2022 NAPSA Western Regional Conference Committee. Adelí has worked on the UCI campus for over 18 years, most notably as the founding director of the Veterans Service Center from 2012 to 2019. Adelí attended UCI studying Chicano Latino studies and psychology and social behavior. So with all that said, Adelí Durón, thank you.
Welcome. I think I really had a hard time trying to figure out what matters to me and why. I went, and as most of you know, those of you that know me, I've got a little cheering squad here. Those of you that know me know that these kinds of things make me nervous. I really don't like talking in front of, giving speeches like this, and definitely not really talking about my personal my personal self, my upbringing and such. And so I really went kind of all over the place. I was like, where can I take this? How do I really talk about this? And so ultimately I landed with really wanting to talk about the origin of my name. And starting there, because that is where my story, part of my story begins, and tells the history, I think, of my parents and my family. So my name is Adelí Lucia Durón. Adelí comes from Las Adelitas, who fought in the Mexican Revolution. They served as cooks, chefs, buried folks, but also bore arms and fought with the men alongside them. And so for me, that's always been part of my story. It's always been kind of this like I've always known my story and my name. And it's something that I get to talk about in the work that I do, right? We have an activity that we do in student affairs called What's in a Name? And so I get to share that with my students often, and the background of my name. But ultimately, I grew up in Montebello, which I think is, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So I'm also a second generation student, which is different than I think most people would expect. So I grew up in this little town called Montebello. There was this kind of running joke when I was growing up. It kind of made it into the radio, saying that Montebello was the Beverly Hills of East LA. And so, I grew up in the hills of Montebello, in probably what was perceived the Beverly Hills of East LA. But that really goes back to me. So this is me as a little girl, to just think about the things that my parents did and influenced. My grandparents, so as a second generation, I'm kind of 2.5. On my father's side, my grandmother, Santos Osorio, was born in Los Angeles, actually. She was orphaned by the age of 9 and then was raised the rest of her life in Juarez, Chihuahua. And so, my parent, she had this advantage of citizenship. She was able to cross over when she needed to because she had citizenship. So all of my dad and my aunts and uncles were all born in El Paso, Texas. And so that gave us this privilege. I think I've always known that I've had a different privilege than most of my peers. And so when my grandmother was raised there in Juarez, and then my father was raised in Juarez until he was 7. So they were born in El Paso and then would cross back and stay. And my grandmother actually ran away from my grandfather due to domestic violence and drinking. And so she came to East LA, and my father was then raised the rest of his life in the Maravilla projects of East LA. And so those experiences, I think, really shaped how my parents got involved and what choices they made. Both my parents went to Loyola Marymount University, and that's where they met. They're college sweethearts. And I think that kind of, for those of you that know me, right, I met my husband here at UC Irvine as well. And so that was part of my story. But right here, it's talking about boycotting Gallo wines, boycotting the grapes, right? So there was a big grape boycott spearheaded by the United Farm Workers. And that was always ingrained in me as that little girl. I never ate grapes in my house when I was a kid. I don't think I was ever able to actually, the first time I think my dad purchased grapes, I think I was in college, because that's when officially the boycott was officially over. So I got to sneak grapes at my grandma's house because she didn't know anything, and so I knew what grapes tasted like. But so this is actually my father right here at UCLA in Mecha. So my parents were both Mechistas in college at LMU, and were very involved on campus. They had the privilege as well of being mentored by some great folks, Father Merrifield, who was the president of LMU at the time, and it allowed them to really find themselves, to become involved, to feel empowered that they could make change, and they could fight for different social justice movements. And then this is me and my siblings, right? And so I want to share a little bit as I progress into kind of my upbringing as the first generation, as the oldest daughter of 3 other kids, I'm 10 years older than my brother. And so there was always a part of me that was, they were kind of like my kids, right? Like I still, now when I scold my oldest son, I sometimes say my brother's name, Max. And I get confused because that's how much older I felt to them. And so when I think about, when we think about kind of the privilege part of this, and really thinking about where, how do I explain it? I've always, I think, been anxious, right, about the fact that I'm second generation, been anxious to share that part of me, because we live in a world, right, where we are celebrating, right, the struggles of our first generation peers, of our first generation students. And so it's really hard to really talk about the fact that I did have like a good, like this is the house I grew up in. It's not what it looked like. They just recently painted that roof blue. They're very proud of it. And so for me, I really wanted to also, I think, kind of going back to then, where did I find myself, right? And so when I went to college, I already knew that I wanted to be in Mecha, right? I had this background from my parents. I knew that for me, social justice and equity were important. And so this is my father at UCLA. So my father went to UCLA Law School, and he shut down the law school building because they were fighting against some admissions decisions that had been made by the law school admissions committee. And so these are these stories that I lived with, right, that really shaped where I kind of took my life and the decisions I made with my career. This is a picture of my parents' what they call the library. And so it's this little tiny room, but I grew up with books everywhere. Books for a long time were just in boxes and in the garage, and my parents were able to make an expansion on the house and build this space. But this closet here holds our art collection. So a big part of my story is growing up with art and seeing the social justice movement in art. And so that you can see one piece there, and there's some ceramic pieces and kind of in between there. But I didn't have too many pictures of my parents' house, so I don't have a lot of the art. But this piece of art called Turtle Island was one of the many images that I grew up with, right? It was about my parents made a decision in the 1980s before I was born to collect art, to really tell the story of our people, to tell the story of Chicanos growing up in LA. And so the art that they collect is specifically Chicano, LA-based Chicano art. And so all of these images, and I didn't get to share all the images that I would have liked to really kind of tell that story. But all the images that I grew up with were what inspired me, what led me to know that what I wanted to do was to fight for students' rights, to advocate for students, to really find a home here at UCI. When I was growing up, I knew, my dad was a lawyer and my mom worked in corporate America in banking. I knew I didn't want to be them. That's all I knew. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be working late. Well, I still work late. But I hadn't seen what I wanted to do. And it really wasn't until I came to UCI that I saw mentors and I saw the programming that we do here at UCI and was like, this is what I want to keep doing. This is the social justice work that I want to keep doing, helping inspire students to advocate for themselves, to find purpose, to help find their identity, and to guide them. This is me during my college years in a Mecha retreat. So I'm there in the little tank top, I think. And so it's really when I think this was probably in the wrong order, but I really wanted to kind of just share that my story has always been about wanting to provide space for students, to provide space for advocacy. And then let's see, what's the next picture? And so then that leads us to the art. So Seeing Chica Next is actually an art collection is currently being seen in the Monterey Museum of Art up north. And it is, I think the work that I'm doing now in the Latinx Resource Center is why like art has always been important. I think it's always been the important journey of telling student stories, right, with creativity. It's why I advocated for us to have a mural kind of that first year that we were in person in our space. And it's, yeah, sorry, I'm like, and so I think what I think I want to leave you all with is really talking about knowing that this is an image of the first image. So the first image I started was a photograph, right? And this is the art image. This actually hangs in my house, and it's just a representation of the Adelita, the little Adelita, that will always hopefully be fighting for social justice and equity. Thank you. Just Q&A.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, adelí. Now we've opened up to Q&A. Yeah, just raise your hand and Kim and I will walk around and hand you the mic. So anybody? Yeah.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Leslie. My partners are Shira Ea, Didim Ea. I work as a transition programs coordinator with the Center for Student Leadership. Wow, I got that down. I have a elevator speech. Okay, Ali, your speech was amazing. It was I've worked for you for a while now, and it was so amazing to hear just so much of your background and how it has influenced who the person you are today. Knowing that you are a mother, how do you think the influences of your parents, what they've left you on with your art, as well as just really naming like the social justice, how has that influenced you being a mother to your children?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the stories I haven't talked about that I meant to talk about is like bilingualism, right? So for me, for my parents, you know, even though I was second generation, it was really important for me to learn Spanish. So we all grew up with speaking Spanish in our house until we were 3 years old, and then English was introduced. And so I've done the same thing with my kids. I think that that's been one way that I've kind of passed that part of it. And I think as a second generation, that's often assumed, right, that I don't know Spanish, that I'm not fluent. And so, and it's happened to me here in the workplace where there were folks who didn't believe that I should have this job because they didn't believe that I spoke Spanish. And so, it's in terms of my children, I think one of the conscious decision I made was to not live in Irvine. I made a conscious decision to live in Santana, to live where my kids would feel community and see the community that reflects them. They're going to a dual immersion school, so they're learning Spanish way more than I did as a child. And then, you know, it's kind of, I think as a kid, it's what you see, right? They go to my parents' house and they see all the art. They go to the art exhibits. We go to, you know, museums and stuff like that, and so they get to see a lot of that. And hopefully with all of those imageries, I'm hoping to tell that story, right? That there's always a story to tell with the imagery, right? It's not just about seeing it, it's about pulling the story and helping them interpret it so that it matters.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Talk about some of your challenges, either as a student or as a staff here at UCI, but what are some of your challenges?
Yeah, I think that I think it goes back to this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, like imposter syndrome of being second generation, of feeling like I'm not here and I'm not there. And so in college, one of the things that really affected me was, you know, I was so involved in Mecha. I was Mecha co-chair my third year. And then my 4th year, I was like, I'm not going to have a leadership role in the organization. I'm going to do, they had a program called Escuelita. So it was like a tutoring program, an outreach tutoring program. So I was like, I'm going to be a tutor for Escuelita. So I applied, and I didn't get the tutoring role. And so I was like, how did I not get the tutoring role? I've been co-chair, like how could I not qualify for this? And the reason I was given was I couldn't relate to the students, that I was 2nd generation, and that I couldn't mentor them the way others could mentor them. And so it's always been this thing in me of like not wanting to disclose sometimes, right? That I'm 2nd generation, that both my parents have professional careers, yeah. Mecha stands for Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. It's a college student organization founded during the Chicano Civil Rights Movement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Hernandez, and I work at the UCI Libraries. I want to thank you for your presentation, Adelí. I'm really inspired by it. I'm a former alumni and former Mechista, and I've recently come back to the university to work, and to see, when I found out there was a Latinx Resource Center, I thought it was like so amazing, because it was something that I think students in previous generations or my generation really could have benefited from this program. But I kind of wanted to know what resources do you see students using the most, or how is this program helping the student body?
Yeah, I have some of my students here. I think students, I think what you said, right? Students really wanted to be seen, and so students advocated for it, and there's the histories online, but did all this advocacy efforts to start the center. And I know that we could have all benefited from it when we were students. Some of the programming, I think the programming that we do is about belonging, right? Is about feeling the sense of belonging, feeling comunidad. And so my big thing is about intersecting, right, academia and art to help build that community for the students. And so it's our students really that do a lot of kind of that integral small group programming. And so we have programming on wellness, on mental health, on like queer conversations, Meet Your Pueblo, which is like meeting people, right? And so really building that community. One of the things that I think, as I was reflecting a few weeks ago, is really trying to prevent the culture shock that students feel, right? And so I know that when I was a student, we were 13% of the student population, and now that we are 25%, I think like, oh, you should see it, like you should see us all, right? You should see yourself reflected in the community. But the numbers have that much increased at the high school levels, right? So at the high school levels, our students are seeing, 90%, 95% of themselves. So that culture shock is still happening. And so I just hope that the work that we're doing is helping prevent students from experiencing that culture shock.
Could you share a little bit about how your father and your parents thought to collect art? Because from my understanding is that they aren't the artists.
No.
They collected it, and you mentioned that now there's a show up in Monterey. Can you talk a little bit about how they bring pieces into your house, and how your father or parents decided on what kind of art, and is it all going to be left to you and your siblings? And
No. So the decision, I think, was to record, it's like a historical component, right? To record what it is that our community is doing, because the collection doesn't just include the artwork that is purchased, it also includes, like when you go to a gallery showing, there's a pamphlet, right, that you get, or there's the actual program for the show. And so what he really wanted to do was make sure that we were conserving it and telling a story about our people. And the thing is that I think that the image that I showed was maybe a more traditional, what you would say like stereotypical piece of art, right? Colorful, bright. But my dad has been very intentional in purchasing pieces that show abstract art, that there's intersectionality within the artist, that just shows ceramics and photography, like it's all over the place, so that it's not, the big thing that he says is Chicano art is not what you think Chicano art is, or Chicanx art is not what you think Chicanx art is. And so to answer the second part of your question is what happens to the collection. The collection will be donated to a museum. And so that's all I can say right now. But yeah. We have portraits that my dad did of us when we were little kids, and so I think I get to keep my portrait, and that's about it. Yeah. There was that question.
Hi, thank you again. You showed that photo growing up, I think it was in Montebello, with the classmate that's an Asian girl.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what it is that you wanted to talk about that photo, but also you mentioned a little bit about being, imposter syndrome as being the second generation. Do you find anything common with other races and ethnicities, other cultures that they might face similar challenges?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. So that's actually my best friend. That's probably us when we were 7 years old. And her name is Jennifer. She's a first generation, comes from a first generation family. She's a first generation immigrant, but born here. And so I think for me, I think I grew up yes, there were a lot of Latinos where I grew up, but there was a huge population. I went to Catholic school, K through 12th as well. And so I grew up with a lot of with the Filipino community. And I think there's so much intersectionality when we talk about like our immigrant stories, when we talk about kind of back home, right? And our parents having relatives, right, in our home countries, still having, we still have extended family, right, in Juarez as well. And so I think the overlap of that story is so important, and really finding commonality with people, right? That it really doesn't matter where we're from in that sense, right? But really wanting to share our stories. And I think I don't, and it was one of those things where I don't even think I thought about those things as a kid, right? And it's not till later that you start to ask, like, wait, she's been my friend forever. Like, but where's her family actually from, right? Like what, they're from Hong Kong, right? And so, so I think it's I think trying to find those commonalities. One of my other friends is also second generation. We met in high school, and for her, we share. There's a commonality there though as well, right? Of feeling like we don't belong here, but we're not like wealthy, right? Like we don't have a bunch of luxuries necessarily. My parents' money went into the art, and so so it was just I think with my friends it was realizing that we try to relate, but sometimes folks won't take us for what for who we are, and realizing that we still have those stories to tell. Right, that we still have our immigration stories from our grandparents.
My name is Giovanni. I'm a first-year PhD student. I wanted to say thank you because it's really exciting to see what you're doing on campus and your leadership, and I admire your vulnerability. And a quote that resonates for me is, "You are your ancestors' wildest dreams." So as the second gen, I really hope you can feel even more connected to everything you're doing, because for me, I'm a first gen. It's inspiring, and I wanted to ask you about how you respond to becoming aware of systems of oppression. Sounds like you were born into a revolutionary family, protesting, like you were taught from an early age, like what it means to be a civil activist. For those of us who learned that later in life, just because of opportunity, what would you advise us to do as we help teach our kids, as like, you know, or currently in our life? Like, just kind of wanted to learn more about your experience, like learning about what that means.
Yeah. How do we? I think with when we think about systems of oppression, I think one is always being conscious of it, right? And when we're sharing, whether it's with our students or our children, right? It's helping them recognize, right, the privilege that they're in, and so and telling those stories. I mean, right now, when I think about what's happening in the world, right, it's really sharing what's, you know, with my son, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, what's happening in Israel, right, in Palestine, right, and talking about those systems, right, which I think talks to a little bit to this image, right, about what war does and how much war can affect populations. And so with my kids, I think it's just being real about what's happening and hoping that that they will continue to advocate, right, whether it's for peace or for justice or for equity.
Hi, Adelie. It's my first time meeting you. I'm so happy to listening to you. I'm a first gen too. And how did you move the post-trauma, like when you have a moments like that you say, okay, I don't know how to integrate myself, you know? And what is the key that you can share with us that makes you motivation to until right now? If we go back 10 years and then we come, you say, this is what supports me so much. Even that you being a second generation is like yours. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I'm first gen, but even it's the same, I think, journey, you know, like it's the same because it's yours. I just wanted to edit that.
Yeah, thank you. Trying to think. Wait, can you repeat part of the actual question part again?
What motivates you on the hard moments?
Yes, okay, that's what it was.
I would have said Spanish, but I foresee myself in English.
No, me puedes decir en español, está bien. No, so I think, so when I think about like my professional journey, I think in terms of motivation, you know.
Sir, I keep this way because I saw that you are the older one.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my God, it's like, you know, like
is it,
yes. Parents, mom,
yes.
Dad, and
Right.
brothers or sisters,
Right.
and then plus the older one.
Right, the older one, yeah. And still, I mean, and even with all of their experiences, still wasn't allowed to apply out of state to go to college somewhere else. So, but, so, you know, when we think, like, I think I have to like backtrack to when we think about this campus, right? We're a 25% HSI, right? We didn't get here because our institution had a strategy. We got here because of staff like me, before me, right? My elders who fought to see diversity in our students, right? To go to the schools in Anaheim, in South Central, right? And recruit students to our universities. That's how we got to 25%. And so for me, like the motivation, right, through these like last 10 years has been seeing the numbers increase, seeing like, okay, like we're getting there, we're getting to 25%, like that's gonna be such an accomplishment for this campus. And then behind the scenes advocating like, okay, so we have a Center for Black Cultures, Resources and Research. When is the Latino Resource Center coming, right? And doing that advocacy behind the scenes and asking those questions. And then being there with, you know, Chicano Latino Staff Association and really, you know, we would do presentations to folks as well about kind of the status of students, you know, where the status of staff and wanting to make change to improve kind of the conditions for our communities. That I think ultimately uplifts all communities.
So I'll go to the first one, and then I think I saw your hand raised.
Thank you for your presentation. What are the social justice issues that matter to you? Interested in knowing.
What are the social? There's some I can talk about and some I think it's so complicated. For me, when I was a kid, the thing that really stuck with me was the fact that we had the garment district in LA, right? And that there were folks that were sewing our clothes for less than minimum wage. That there was this big, like boycott Guess. There were like, boycotting of certain companies and so there was this moment of when I made this realization of this is like what I grew up with boycotting grapes, and then I wrote, like I think there was like a project I had to do, and so I did all this like as a middle schooler, did all this research on like the garment industry, on like slave labor. And so for me, that has always been kind of this passion in terms of wanting to buy sustainable products, sustainable food, fair trade food, and so I think that's one pocket of it. But with my current work in the Orange County Human Relations Commission, I think it's making sure that the voices of those that are feeling oppressed in our communities, feeling hate crimes in our communities, making sure that those voices are being heard, and that we're treating all of the voices that we can with as much equity as possible.
Hi, I just wanted to start off and say thank you so much for the work that you're doing with the Latinx Research Center. I'm an alum and also a staff member who's returning, and I absolutely wish that was here when I was here. I guess my question is, as a 1.5% or gen Mexican American whose parents kind of right away wanted to integrate and didn't speak Spanish at home, what kind of tips do you have to kind of, bridge that gap to like me wanting to be more part of the culture but not knowing the language, having parents who wanted to integrate as fast as possible, so kind of I'm in this like nowhere land. Kind of where how do I reconnect with like my heritage?
Yeah, I hear that so much. There's a staff member that I work closely with, and she and I were actually students at the same time. We weren't friends then or anything, right? And so now, as like both staff members here on campus, we've reflected on like, why didn't you get involved in Mecha? And it's that. I didn't know Spanish. I didn't feel welcome. I didn't feel that folks felt that I could relate. So I took myself out essentially. And so I really hope that what the center does is that we're bringing that we're doing educational programming, right? So especially when we do our large community events, it's very much about education. It's welcoming everyone, right, to the table, not just, right? It's not just for Latino students. I think that's the other thing is that we're trying to educate about the culture and the community. And so coming out to the events that our students are doing is one way. We have this other program that's called Spanish Hour. It's a Spanish conversations program. And never something that I thought we would be doing, but we started getting these questions about, what if I want to, I wish I could speak Spanish to people. And then others of like, I wish I could learn, like I don't, I understand it, but I don't really feel comfortable speaking it, and asking us if we have that type of program. So after about 1.5 years of getting those questions, we decided to pilot a program, and we've had some really good results over the last year or so. And so what we hope in that space is what we're doing is we're creating a safe space, right? To understand that not everyone is coming in at all different levels, and it's an opportunity if that's what you want to do, right? If you want to gain more knowledge or feel more comfortable, right? Because there are so many of us that I know. And I think in so many cultures, right, that understand your grandparents, right, but maybe don't feel, and you speak you respond to your grandparents in English, right? They understand you, but you're not feeling comfortable necessarily speaking the language.
So thank you very much for that. You've talked about the importance of art, but I noticed it's all visual art. What about music?
You know, I actually didn't grow up with too much music in that. Yeah, I mean, my parents listened to music, but not, I don't think in the same way that, that culturally I think about growing up with music, right? Like in the morning, right, having like banda or, right, different stations on playing music. I didn't grow up with that. So,
Or dancing.
yeah. My kids are dancing. In terms of like when I think about cultural dance, right, ballet folklorico, my cousin always danced when I was a kid, and I always envied her and wanted to dance. And so then I came to college, and there was a class at the time that taught ballet folklorico, and it was integrated with the performing group ballet folklorico at UCI. And so I took the class, have 2 left feet for that. But dragged my suite mate into that class. And he did amazing. He's Guatemalan. And so he went on to continue performing with the group while I was kind of the soccer mom taking pictures. And he's my husband now. So.
I know that there are various motivations for why people choose not to capitalize their first and last name, and I was hoping you could please share yours.
Yes, I missed so many things. That was supposed to be part of the beginning. Yes, so part of that is the honoring, right, of the ancestors of las Adelitas, but it comes from bell hooks. So, reading bell hooks and the reason that she chose not to capitalize her name, that it kind of inspired me to think about kind of the background of what my name comes from, and wanting to honor them as kind of those ancestors that really fought the fight for me to be to have the privilege of where I am now.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Sherwin Umali, Student Affairs, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I've known Adelí for a long time now, and I know you to ask really hard questions, so I'm going to ask you a hard question. Two questions. First question is, what do you've had a great journey here at UCI, but we have many more years to retirement. Mm-hmm. So what is your like next big thing, you think, and along your journey? Yeah. And then also, when we retire, because we will soon, kind of, what is your, what legacy do you want to leave?
Oh, those are so hard, Sherwin. Why? What's my next big thing? I really want to stay with the center right now. Like, I really want to build up the center. I still, I think the pandemic kind of threw, right, the screw in everything. And so I still feel like my work is still beginning. Like, I still hasn't grown to where I would like to see. I think the development of the programming and kind of the growth of the students that we're impacting. So I still, I don't know if it's for 10 years, but I still see myself kind of there in this. And I still have 3 kids that I'm raising and a new baby. So I'm not trying to make any big changes right now. Still managing the baby. And then the second part was my legacy. I don't know. I think, yeah, that's tough. I mean, my intro talks about, right, I serve as the inaugural director of the 2 centers. And so to me, I think that, I hope that, that's a part of the legacy, right? And I hope that what it really is that I've been able to make an impact on students and an impact on change for our student communities. I think people that now know me in this role, I think get surprised, right, that I worked with veteran services. But working in that with those students, it was always about wanting to serve those who served us, right? Feeling like our veteran students were made a lot of promises, right, when they joined the military, and wanting to help at least do one part in fulfilling on those promises, right, and giving them their free education that they were promised, and hoping that I'm explaining things smoothly and making that process for them smoothly. And I know from feedback that I've gotten that I was able to do that, you know, a lot of that, and really hope that I continue to do that now for the community that I'm passionate about, that's part of my identity.
Thank you, Adelí. Get the, yeah, a round of applause, please. Yeah.
And I'm sure Adelí will be here for a few minutes if you want to come up and ask her another question. But thank you all for coming, and hope to see you next month.
Thank you.